Well, I want to welcome you this evening to our workshop, which is titled Finding Happiness After Brain Injury, and to our fundraiser, which has been a silent auction and a raffle. I'm so very glad that all of you could be here tonight. My name is Carol Starr, and I co-facilitate Brain Injury Voices, the group that organized this multi-part event, which began at 11 o'clock this morning with the auction and raffle, and will conclude this evening. Voices' mission is threefold. We work to educate, advocate, and support. You can see it up on our bulletin board here. I think today's event encompasses all three of those words. We've been working really hard over the last several months to put together this event. We've been soliciting donations, organizing the workshop, publicizing it, selling raffle tickets. I think it is the biggest thing that we've done in the 2 years that we've existed as a group. I am so very proud of all of us and all the work that we've done, not only today, but also over the last couple of years. So I want to take this opportunity to thank Brain Injury Voices. Could I ask members of Voices to stand, please? Or wave? Yeah, I'll stand up, guys. As you all know, this is both a workshop and a fundraiser. What we're trying to do is to raise money to send survivors from the New England Rehab Brain Injury Support Group to the main brain injury conference in October, which will be held at USM. So many individuals and businesses have been very generous in donating items for this auction and raffle. Donors have included members of Voices, members of the support group, as well as individuals and businesses in the community, not to mention staff here at New England Rehab. As you can see from our tables, we've got a lot of stuff. We've collected more than 50 items. On your handouts, there's like a yellow, on the tables, there's a yellow handout that lists all of the donors. So we've been really so very moved by the generosity of everyone. So here's how this evening is going to work. I'm going to be turning the mic over to Kathy Kroll very soon. She's going to be the MC for the first half of the program. After the Voices panel, which will be up here, there's going to be a 15-minute break to give you some time to buy some last-minute raffle tickets, check out the bids, and then at that point, at about 7:10, 7:15, the auction and raffle will be closed. We won't be doing any more with those sales. After I speak, we're going to be collecting the pink evaluation forms that are in your packet. What I'm going to encourage you to do is, as the program goes on, is to be filling out those evaluations, because filling out the evaluation is the only way that you can participate in the final raffle. We have got four different raffles at the very end, and that when you fill out the form and turn in your ticket, or turn in the form, you'll get a ticket, and that will be for the final raffle. The program itself is going to end probably a little bit before 8. We're aiming for about 7:45 or so. Then Mark Kiebert from Voices is going to take over as the MC and guide us through drawing the raffles and awarding the silent auction. So that is probably going to take us a little bit past 8 o'clock. When we originally planned this, we planned for maybe having 20 to 30 items, not 50, so our timing got a little off. And lastly, I want to recognize Kathy Kroll from New England Rehab. She's been our primary staff liaison person here. She attends all of our meetings and is always so willing to offer help and suggestions and advice. Voices could not be as successful as we are without the support that we receive, not only from Kathy, but also from all of the staff here at New England Rehab. So we want to say that we appreciate everything that you do for us.
Thank you, Carol and Voices, and on behalf of New England Rehab Hospital, I'd like to welcome you to the Brain Injury Perspectives Finding Happiness. This evening we are going to keep our questions to the minimum because, as you can see from Carol, she's pretty task-oriented and we have a tight schedule. Members of Voices will be around after if you have any specific questions. I'm sure if they're not too fatigued, they'll be able to answer them for you. We're asked now that if you have a cell phone to put it on silence. Everybody. If you need to use a restroom, they are out this side door to the left, right through the hallway, and I believe they might be to the right or left, but they're labeled pretty clearly. We are recording this presentation tonight. Voices in their, their mission to be able to educate wants to be able to use this in many other ways, and one of them I want to put a shout out to Kandahar Air Base of Afghanistan. It's our hope that we will send this video over to the air base in Kandahar, where my daughter is a captain in the Army and is working with the wounded warriors and the trauma unit there in the hospital, so we're sending that to them. Also that it's Flag Day, so if you're seeing flags around, we're very proud that we're here today on Flag Day. At this time, I would like to introduce Dr. Howard Kunin. Dr. Howard Kunin is a psychologist practicing with neurobehavioral services, and he's on the staff at New England Rehab Hospital here. He also co-facilitates a very successful group, Practical Skills for Recovery, along with Susie Kelly, the occupational therapist in the outpatient department. Many of the participants in our brain injury support group have benefited from attending this program and work with their strategies. And most of the people in that group that have attended that program hold Dr. Kunin in their highest esteem. So at this time, Dr. Kunin, thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I hope everyone can hear me okay. When Carol and Beth first approached me about talking this evening, they said the topic was about happiness after brain injury, finding happiness after brain injury. And it really has me stumped because I'm really not sure how to define happiness or what it is in general, much less to try to talk to folks who are living with some of the challenges and struggles that the people in this room have lived with and how to find happiness after that. So I'm going to try to approach this in a couple of different ways. The first thing I want to do is speak a little more clinically about some of the factors that can play into emotional well-being after brain injury, and to share the findings of a few interesting studies. Next, I want to discuss some skills and ideas related to mindfulness and mindfulness practice that I know some of the people in this room have found helpful. And finally, I want to share some wisdom that I heard recently at a high school graduation as offered by one of the graduating seniors. The first study that I want to mention considered the challenge of regaining a sense of subjective well-being in the face of chronic impairment that can accompany brain injury, particularly the cognitive impairments in memory, attention, and problem solving that can be present. The most notable finding of this study is that often it's not the actual impairments or deficits that cause the most distress or that really affect well-being. Most often it's the individual's subjective experience of those deficits and how their self-concept is affected. In other words, it doesn't matter if attention or memory were working better than you think they are. It's how you think about it and the emotional impact that has that matters the most. A second study that I want to mention looked at what it was like for patients with frontal lobe traumatic brain injury to recognize emotions in the facial expressions of other people. This is important because so much of life is about interacting with and relating to other people. And if we're not able to accurately read other people's facial expressions and emotions, it's going to have an impact on our own emotional state, and usually not a positive one. So the interesting finding here was that people with frontal lobe brain injury tended to perceive more intense emotion than was likely present, especially if that emotion was a more negative one, such as fear or anger or sadness. If you thought someone was angry or upset, you would think that they were very angry or very upset, even if that wasn't necessarily the case. So you can imagine then how perceiving more intense emotion in others than is actually present can add to someone's distress, and that learning how to turn down some of that emotional reactivity can add to someone's emotional well-being. The last study that I want to mention here reminds us that brain injury doesn't just affect the individual who has been injured, but it also affects those most close to them as well. And because that is the case, happiness and emotional well-being after brain injury also needs to be seen in the context of relationships. This particular study looked at couples' happiness after brain injury, and it found that the way that the couple functioned in everyday life made a big difference in life satisfaction, and that functioning in everyday life included not only concrete tasks, but leisure time and a social life as well. The message here seems to be that within the rehabilitation process, it's important to include spouses and other significant people, and that outside the rehabilitation process, it's just important to spend time doing things together. So the question next arises, how do you get there from here? How do you regain a sense of subjective well-being in the face of change and loss and perhaps chronic impairments? It's not going to surprise anyone to know that there are no simple answers to those questions, and certainly there isn't any one-size-fits-all approach. But there are some skills and strategies that are proving to be of value to people as they try to navigate the process of recovery and adjustment. The skills and strategies I want to talk a little bit about tonight are related to the concept of mindfulness. Mindfulness practice is a way to direct the focus of the mind and begin to develop a sense of control, which can be useful when it feels as if your whole world is out of control. It's not about controlling what we think or controlling what we feel, or even about controlling the endless flow of emotions or thoughts or sensory information that can flood our minds. It's more about learning to be in control of our attention processes. That is, what we pay attention to and how long we pay attention to it. It's learning to be in control of our own mind rather than our mind being in control of us. Why the emphasis on mindfulness practice? Well, there are a couple of reasons. The first is that there's a growing body of research that indicates that mindfulness practice is a very useful approach in treating depression and anxiety in general, and that it may hold particular potential for helping people to recover a sense of value and meaning after brain injury. For example, recall that study I mentioned earlier, that is often not the actual impairments, but the perception of impairments that has the most impact on a sense of well-being. Well, there are a number of studies which show that mindfulness meditation, practiced over time, was able to reduce both negative thoughts and to reduce reactivity to those thoughts. What this suggests is that over time it can be possible for someone to change their perception of their impairments, perhaps from a more negative perception to one that is more balanced. And changing our perception in that way can help to improve an overall sense of well-being. The second reason to emphasize mindfulness practice is that it may be helpful in reducing fatigue and in improving both attention and working memory, aspects of cognition that are often affected by brain injury. Along with this, some researchers are looking into neurobiological changes that may be related to mindfulness practice and how specific areas of the brain change over time with mindfulness meditation. Neuroimaging studies have shown that mindfulness meditation activates several important areas of the brain, such as the prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex, as well as the hippocampus. I think for all of us, our attention skills are being challenged right now. These areas are related to attention and emotion regulation, among other things. So while these are still early studies, they provide another reason to include mindfulness practice as part of brain injury recovery. Mindfulness practice itself can be broken down into several components. The first is mindful breathing, usually abdominal or diaphragmatic breathing, taking slow, deliberate breaths with a focus on the act of breathing itself. And this is really a skill like any other skill, one that becomes more effective and more automatic with practice. By increasing our awareness of our own breathing patterns and shifting to a more abdominal style of breathing, we can reduce muscle tension and anxiety that can be present with stress-related thoughts and symptoms. And we can also begin the practice of learning how to direct our attention where we want it to go. The second component of mindfulness practice involves skills of observing, describing, and participating. We can be aware and attentive to what we are doing, or we can be on automatic pilot. While we all slip into automatic pilot from time to time, we're generally going to do a better job of whatever we're doing if we're really paying attention to what we're doing. Whether it's driving a car, reading a book, cooking a meal, even just brushing our teeth. And some of you here remember that exercise from the class about paying attention to brushing your teeth. The more we practice being aware and attentive on the simpler, more mundane day-to-day tasks, like getting dressed or eating breakfast, the stronger our attention skills can become. and the more we're going to be able to function effectively in stressful or chaotic situations. I'm big on sports analogies, and we're in the middle of the professional basketball championship series right now. So the analogy I would make is that at some point in a big game, one of the players is going to be on the free throw line. The crowd is going to be screaming, there's going to be chaos all around them, and he's going to have to focus his attention on the ball and on the basket and on the right mechanics of the shot if he's going to be successful. If he's been practicing that shot regularly, really paying attention to all those little things day to day, then his chances of being successful are a lot higher than if he's been sitting on the sidelines thinking about what he's going to do after practice. The ball won't always go in the basket, but our chances of success are a lot higher when we practice skills regularly with all the attention we can muster. In addition to the skills involved in mindfulness practice, there are some important attitudes and principles that we can try to follow. The most important one is probably radical acceptance, and that's a term that reflects the ability to let go of the urge to fight reality and instead to face it as it is at the moment. It's a myth to think that refusing to recognize reality is going to make it go away. If I have a terrible sense of direction and refuse to use a GPS, or even to stop and ask for directions, my sense of direction isn't going to get any better. I'm only going to get lost more often. Radical acceptance is not the same as approval, and it doesn't mean being passive or giving up. It's more like acknowledging and recognizing and enduring. It's a willingness to do what works for you under the circumstances of the moment. That may mean using a memory aid like a scheduler, because otherwise you're going to miss important appointments. It may mean pacing yourself and working in short segments because you fatigue more easily than you used to. Radical acceptance isn't a one-time experience. It's an active choice, one that you need to make over and over. It reflects the idea that it is what it is, the positive and the negative, which may both be present at the same time. The benefit of being able to radically accept the way things are can be more effective functioning, getting along better with those around you, and an increased sense of well-being. So this idea of radical acceptance was actually in a graduation speech I heard at a recent high school graduation. And the speaker was one of the graduating seniors who had faced some of her own challenges during high school. She didn't call it radical acceptance. Instead, she described it as, sometimes it's okay. And with her permission, I'm going to read some of what she said that day. There are days when everything goes well. You aren't rushing out the door in the morning. You pass all your tests. Your friend brings you a copy of your favorite album, and no one steps on you in the halls. That's a pretty awesome day. Then there are those bad days, the ones that seem to pop up way too often. The ones that make you want to just crawl back under the covers and sleep for at least 3 months. You completely miss your alarm, most likely because you stayed up all night studying, only to remember right before the test that you could have made a note sheet. Your allergies decide to give you a hard time and, well, because of the allergies and the lack of sleep, or both, you just can't sit still or pay attention. Those days, well, they're not very fun. But sometimes it's okay. Not every day is going to be great. Not every day is going to be terrible. Most of them are okay, and I find that people forget to focus on those days, the days that make up the majority of our months and years. People will ask, "How are you?" And if the answer is simply okay, they usually respond with, "Just okay? Well, what's wrong?" But in reality, I think okay is a much better response than people often think. Because you're not always going to be good or great, but you most certainly aren't always going to be awful or on the verge of dying. Sometimes it's just okay. The world isn't black and white. It isn't a single picture captured in a single black and white frame. It is mostly the in-between, the shades of gray, and it's always changing and flowing. I think that as humans we tend to forget this. We think in terms of thumbs up or thumbs down, best dressed and worst dressed, winners and losers. We forget everything in the middle, we forget that there's not always a right or wrong, that there's not always an answer, and that's okay. There are days when we feel like everything is going perfectly, and that's okay. But there will also be times that confusion and conflict will overwhelm us, and that's okay too. Sometimes it's just okay. And when you think about it, being okay is great, because being okay means that you are alive and living, that you're aware of the middle ground, that you see most of the world around you, and that you can handle whatever life throws your way. So to wrap things up, if there's a takeaway message, I guess it would be this. There are real challenges and difficulties that come with brain injury, both for patients and families, and those can't be minimized or wished away. But emotional well-being, and maybe even happiness, are possible when you're able to face those challenges openly and directly, when you're able to do things in a way that's effective for you, and when you know that you have the skills and support to handle whatever life may bring you. Thank you.